Hello, everyone. Welcome to our last talk for Unit 5. So, we're actually going to round up Unit 5 with a nationalism discussion. It's sometimes talked about with revolutions, and you'll notice some of the same material on the nationalism page as we had on revolutions. And that is because really what happens in this time period between the revolutions between the Enlightenment, the revolutions, and also the Industrial Revolution, like big one, Industrial Revolution. We have this growth in nationalism. So let's talk a little bit about what nationalism is. And we're going to look at two specific countries. We're going to look at Germany and Italy. So, nationalism, for those of you who don't know, nationalism is a strong sense of pride in one's own culture, ethnic group, or country. It is different from patriotism. We will have that conversation in class. So, think about what are some symbols of nationalism that we see here in the United States. Be thinking about that when you come to class. So, what does the unification of Germany look like? Well, first, you have to know, or you have to realize that in Europe about this time, you had France that was kind of had it together. You had England that kind of had it together, but you still had Germany and Italy that, while yes, it was Germany, they were still broken up into all these different provinces that were kind of independently run. So when we talk about the unification of Germany, we are really talking about Germany coming together as Germans instead of Bavarians and Moravians and, so on and so forth. So, how did they get this way? Well, it has a lot to do with the Holy Roman Empire. It has a lot to do with Charlemagne and his death. So, going way back, we hopefully remember that Charlemagne was able to reunite most of Europe for the first time after the fall of the Roman Empire. But upon his death, he didn't leave one single successor. And he had three sons. So instead of the eldest son just assuming power, they separated all of Charlemagne's territories and lands between the three sons. One got like a sliver of like France and Spain, and one got like Switzerland and Italy, and the other one got the rest of what we consider main Europe, the main portion of Europe. So he got like Germany. So the one that got Germany ended up becoming the Holy Roman Empire for reasons. One son died, and yeah. So the Holy Roman Empire was not holy, it was not Roman, and it definitely was not an empire. But for centuries to come, it would be called the Holy Roman Empire, and it would be this territory in Germany that would be the Holy Roman Empire. So when we talk about the Holy Roman Empire, we're actually talking about a multi-ethnic complex of territories that's in Central Europe that developed during the early Middle Ages and continued until its dissolution in 1806. This is actually the largest territory of the empire after 962 was the Kingdom of Germany, though it also came with the Kingdom of Bohemia, the Kingdom of Burgundy, and the Kingdom of Italy, and also numerous other territories that you can see here. You've got duchies, you've just got territories. So it's just a whole bunch of stuff put together. Then you have this dude, Otto von Bismarck. Well, what's his story? Well, first you need to understand the territory of Prussia. So the foundations for Prussia were laid by Frederick William. Yes, because in Germany they pronounce their W's with a V. And the Great Elector. So this happened approximately 1640 to 1688. And he actually inherited the land that was known as Brandenburg, Prussia. And it was this small open territory that had like no natural defenses. So they built an army of about 40,000 men, and it became the fourth largest in Europe. And they developed a very civilized or civil government. So this is what we can see today, a very civil government. Except it was ran by land-owning aristocracy. Yeah. So these were the officials. These were the officials in the government. They were the members of the land-owning aristocracy, the Junkers. They also served as military officers in the army. Sorry, Ipa is being a little bit of a turd right now. So in 1701, his son Frederick I became king of Prussia, and Prussia would emerge as a great power in Europe. So this is the Kingdom of Prussia. So it's kind of like this northern part here of the empire. Hang on. So how does this all lead to the German unification? Well, there had been many attempts to unite Germany in the past, and they had all failed. So Germans actually looked to Prussia for leadership because they had a very large army. They seemed to have their crap together. So it had become strong and prosperous and a very much authoritarian state. So the Prussian king had control over government and the army, which, authoritarian. So enter King William I, who appointed a new prime minister who was Otto von Bismarck. And he was appointed to prime minister to spearhead the king's projects and visions for a united Germany. Well, what's funny about Bismarck is that he pretty much ignored all legislative opposition to get things done. And this is what we call realpolitik. And realpolitik is basically just pushing forward with your agenda, ignoring everything else. So all of those haters, all those naysayers, you're just like, they mad because they ain't us, right? Or they're hating because they ain't us, whatever the saying is. So he actually had, Bismarck was actually one of the most successful statesmen in the 19th century. Both political and diplomatic talents made this possible to unite Germany under one leadership or under one leader, and that would be Prussia. And he ultimately rose to the role of prime minister, which he had held for 30 years. That's kind of unheard of. And the main goal in his appointment was the unification, to take the diverse German people and states and unite them together. And he actually accomplished this through diplomacy and war. Bismarck is portrayed as the ultimate realist, and this is where we get the realpolitik from. And this 19th century practitioner of realpolitik is just politics of reality. So again, you look at what is in front of you and you basically say, this is what we're going to do because this is what is needed, and you go out and do it. This realpolitik is based on practical concerns rather than theory or ethics. I mean, makes sense. Makes sense. So this is one of the more famous quotes that is attributed to Bismarck. So it says, Germany does not look to Prussia's liberalism, but to her power. Not by speeches in majorities will the great questions of the day be decided. That was the mistake of 1848 to 1849, but by iron and blood. Dun, dun, dun. So Bismarck recognized that you needed to work hard, establish diplomacy, and then in the end, also go to fighting. So Germany actually defeated Denmark with Austria's help. They were able to gain control over the duchies. Bismarck actually created friction with Austrians and, basically pushed them into war in 1866. And the Austrians were absolutely no match for the Prussian army. So they were 100% defeated. This connected the Northern German Confederation under one. Now, the focus had to be on the southern states, which were still independent, but they had signed a military alliance because they were afraid of France, their western neighbor. So this Alsace-Lorraine region here is actually the region that Germany, through a war, took away from France. And so this part was very much afraid of France. So they signed a military agreement to align with the northern states here. I know, pretty awesome. Like, it's pretty awesome. So France was uneasy about the growing power of this strong German state. So in 1870, Prussia and France went to war, and it was over a situation that Bismarck actually manipulated intentionally. The southern German states actually honored their alliance and went to fight with Prussia against the French. And ultimately, France would lose. Dun, dun, dun. France and Germany have always had a very contentious relationship, and France has always been on the losing end of this. Well, not always, because ultimately they would win, but they would win because of the help of the, British in the United States. But, whatever. So on January 18th, 1871, in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, William I was proclaimed Kaiser, or Emperor of the Second Reich, or Second German Empire, because technically the first was the medieval Holy Roman Empire. And here is images of the war. It's just so pretty. It's just so pretty. Okay. So, one of the questions that we need to think about is, how did Otto von Bismarck encourage the growth of this nationalist feelings in Germany? And we need to think about how nationalist feelings grow anywhere and everywhere, not just in Germany, but how do people get nationalist feelings to grow? So what are some other examples during this period? Well, you do have Lola Rodriguez de Tio. Lola was born in Saint-Germain, where she received her primary education. Her schooling continued at home, where various intellectuals and politicians often met. In 1868, she was inspired by the call for Puerto Rican independence, known as Grito de la Res. She wrote patriotic lyrics to the tune. Ooh, I'm not even going to attempt that. The song became very popular, and it brought her into the conflict with Spanish authorities. So she and her family moved, where she published her first book of poetry that sold 2,500 copies. The family then fled to Venezuela, where they met Eugenio Maria. And upon their return to Puerto Rico, she and her husband actually founded a magazine. They were then exiled again, returning first to Venezuela and then to Cuba. And once in Havana, their home became a popular gathering place for politicians and intellectuals. So here is a piece of her poetry. And the song is actually pretty remarkable. Press play. Press play in the PowerPoint. So let's talk